Hi! So my project was on civic engagement at Whitman College as understood through hometown population. So this is the abstract. You can refer to the PowerPoint for the full read. My research question was whether the type of hometown, rural, suburban, or urban that a Whitman student grew up in affect the type and amount of civic engagement they participate in. Civic engagement here is defined as community service, individual volunteerism, and/or political or social activism. I didn't have a hypothesis because there's spuriousness between the two variables. There are a lot of other variables at work, such as socioeconomic status or race that can influence, so given past research I decided not to have a hypothesis. This is a literature review. Overall I looked at 4 main sources, and most of them looked at the notion between the difference between civic engagement activities in an urban or suburban or rural hometown. Although most research was looked specifically at one hometown type, there wasn't a lot of research that was comparative. Most researchers came to the conclusion that there were a lot of variables that they hadn't accounted for, and there needs to be more in-depth research into those other variables. So my research methods, my data collection procedure, I sent out my survey as a convenient sample of current Whitman College students, and I did multiple class levels, sophomore, junior, and senior students. And I emailed the survey to students because the college was on break. I didn't give them a hard copy. So my sample size, I sent out my survey to 18 students, and my response rate was 8 students, 7 female and 1 man. So my variable measurement. My independent variable was hometown size, and I measured this on my survey as a close-ended question. The first option being less than 30,000, and then the second is 30,000 to 100,000, and then the last was a population of more than 100,000. And then the dependent variable was the amount and the type of civic engagement that they participated in. So this was also measured as a closed-ended question, but it was a set of questions that looked at general extracurricular participation, and I did that in a chart form. So first I coded the responses to isolate those that were specifically about civic engagement, and then I analyzed them based on 3 response categories. So the first was the percentage of the total extracurriculars that were civic engagement activities, and then the second was how often the individual participated in those civic activities. And then the third was whether or not the activity was affiliated with Whitman College. So then I analyzed the relationship between hometown size and then each of those 3 measures of the dependent variable. So this is my survey. The beginning is just the introduction, the notification of confidentiality, and then my information. And then these 2 are closed-ended questions about gender and the population of one's hometown, and then this is the chart that allowed for a description of extracurricular activities. So my results, I'm going to break them down into the 3 types of relationships that I talked about earlier. So this first one is looking at the percent of activities that were civic engagement, and I'm comparing it to hometown size. So here you can actually see a pretty big difference. Those from a rural hometown size of less than 30,000 participated just about 40%. Just about 40% of their total extracurriculars were civic activities, whereas those from a hometown larger than 100,000 were just above 60%. So that's a pretty large jump. And then these two charts are looking at the amount of time that was spent doing civic engagement activities. So this top one is for those that were from a hometown of less than 30,000, and then the bottom one is for those from a hometown of more than 100,000. There isn't a huge difference between the two. The main difference you can see is that those from urban backgrounds participate a little bit more frequently. So the weekly and multiple times a semester categories are slightly larger than those for the rural hometowns. The rural hometown is pretty well evenly divided, 60% weekly and then 20% multiple times a semester.